Open your eyes. Open your eyes.
I love the Pixar one. That's so good. Ah, it's good stuff. Oh, get the shuffle on. How's everyone doing today? Everyone's good? Thank you, Alex Babzine. So today we have a couple things. We have a Nearpod activity that we're going to be doing together. So it might be a little confusing for you at first, but just be aware of that because I'm going to explain it in a second. And then second thing we have to do is I didn't create it. It's a historical like source. One sec. Go to the waffle iron, shall we? There we go. In Google Classroom, I posted in your announcements tab, okay? It says, here is a Google form version of an Alabama literacy test. Now, we talked about grandfather clause, poll taxes, and literacy tests. And so what I did is I took an actual literacy test and I made a Google form. And I would like you to go on there. You don't really have to answer it, but every question on there is a real question. And if it was multiple choice, it was multiple choice in real life. And if it was short answer, it was short answer in real life. And that's why I left it like that. So if you go to it, here it is. You can kind of take a look at it. I put all the answers at the end. So if you just want to kind of see how difficult it is, definitely check that out. This is an actual literacy test. And the one thing I want to point out about these literacy tests that are super important is they were not given to everybody in the society. Okay, they were chosen. Different literacy tests were given to different communities based on the socioeconomic status of that community. So if it was a poorer community, it got a harder test because they didn't want those people to vote. If it was a wealthier community, they kind of would break the rules. And it's kind of important that you realize that. By the way, I'm still drinking Dunkin' because I'm waiting for my coffee to arrive in the mail. Yeah, there's that. So your Nearpod is going to look like this slide right here. Give me a sec. Hold on. All right, so there we go. Basically, I made each Nearpod page. It's about protest signs. Okay, so the first one is going to be all about decent housing signs. The next one is going to be about voting rights, and the third. Did I double up on the signs here? I did. Anyway, you get the point. The point. There it is. The point is that when you go to Nearpod, all right, it's going to look like this, right? And it's a collaboration board. So let's preview it. It's going to look like this. There'll be a picture, and then it'll say decent housing protest sign. At almost every civil rights protest, there would be signs held up with slogans and demands for what the protesters sought. Analyze each sign below and fill in what the problem was and what the eventual solution was. So I want you to tell me what the problem is, why the sign exists, and then what do you think the solution was as we talk about the history and things like that. So I'll come back to this. But this is something that you don't have to worry about the first half, but I'll tell you, hey, you guys should be heading over to Nearpod to do that, and then that would be good. And there you go. How's my music? Do you even hear it? Hold on. Oh, I do. It's beautiful. It's beautiful music. All right, so today we're going to get right into the lesson. How's everyone doing today? I might slow the chat down. Now, yesterday, if you recall, a little review before I slow the chat down. All right, yesterday we talked about the Jim Crow era, right? We talked about Brown versus the Board of Ed and Plessy versus Ferguson. Plessy versus Ferguson was in 1898, and it legalized segregation. Brown versus the Board of Ed is going to be the first Supreme Court rule that kind of outlaws segregation. We talked about that. We also talked about how the people reacted, and the truth is they didn't react very nicely. This led to the Little Rock Nine, where these 9 African-American students had to be, first the Arkansas National Guard was called out against them, but then later President Eisenhower comes in and he's going to support them with the United States Marine Corps. And I have a little reading that I kind of want to give to you that I'm just going to read out loud. So I'm going to do, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to bring the reading over here, and I'm going to give you a beautiful background. How's that? There you go. So you get to look at the beautiful background, and I get to, hold on. There we go. And I get to read you something, so pay attention. Here we go. Dwight D. Eisenhower's response to the Little Rock crisis. Can you imagine armed soldiers blocking you from going to school? That is just what happened in Little Rock, Arkansas in 1957. The Supreme Court decision Brown versus the Board of Education of Topeka, Kansas, made segregated public schools illegal. All American schools would soon need to desegregate and allow black and white students to attend. The governor of Arkansas, Orville Fubas, hated this decision and ordered the Arkansas National Guard to prevent 9 African-American students from enrolling at Little Rock Central High School. President Dwight D. Eisenhower demanded that Governor Fubas allow the students to attend school and keep the National Guard on hand to protect them. A few days later, when the 9 African-American students attempted to go to school, a riot erupted, and Fubas did nothing to stop the violence. A furious Eisenhower placed the Arkansas National Guard under federal control and sent 1,000 U.S. Army paratroopers from the 101st Airborne Division to assist them in restoring order in Little Rock and escort the students to school safety. The following is an excerpt from the radio and TV address from September 24, 1957. Good evening, my fellow citizens. For a few minutes this evening, I want to speak to you about the serious situation that has arisen in Little Rock. In the South, as elsewhere, citizens are keenly aware of the tremendous disservice that has been done to the people of Arkansas in the eyes of the nation, and that has been done to the nation in the eyes of the world. At a time when we face grave situations abroad because of the hatred that communism bears towards a system of government based on human rights, it would be difficult to exaggerate the harm that is being done to the prestige and influence, and indeed to the safety of our nation and the world. Our enemies are gloating over this incident and using it everywhere to misrepresent our whole nation. We are portrayed as a violator of those standards of conduct which the people of the world united to proclaim in the Charter of the United Nations. There they affirm faith in fundamental human rights and in dignity and worth of the human person. And they did so without distinction as to race, sex, language, or religion. And so, with deep confidence, I call upon the citizens of the state of Arkansas to assist in bringing to an immediate end all interference with the law and its processes. If resistance to the federal court orders ceases at once, the further presence of federal troops will be unnecessary, and the city of Little Rock will return to its normal habits of peace and order, and a blot upon the fair name and high honor of our nation in the world will be removed. Thus will be restored the image of America in all its parts as one nation, indivisible, with liberty and injustice for all. Good night, and thank you very much. And that was a speech by President Dwight D. Eisenhower. Okay, now I want you to notice, and the reason why I read this to you is we tend to, in social studies class, we tend to separate the difference between bring up the chat. There you go. We tend to separate the difference between the civil rights and the Cold War, but the truth of the matter is they are connected. You know, we are telling communism that it's better to be an American because we have freedom, we have rights, right? We're all about individual choice, and in communism they take that away from you. And yet, we're not giving that to African Americans throughout the 1940s, 1950s, 1960s, right, in this country. And so it does become an embarrassing stain on the image of America, especially in regards to the Cold War and the way we try to represent ourselves as being the superior nation and the best country in the world. And so President Eisenhower, Dwight D. Eisenhower, did not appreciate what was happening in Little Rock because, you know, communists in Soviet Russia are looking at this saying, Americans are hypocrites. They talk about civil liberties and human rights, but look what they're doing to their own people. They won't even let black and white kids go to school together. They have soldiers, you know, sent to the school to stop black kids. And Eisenhower couldn't let this happen. So it's important that you understand that this is all kind of connected. All right. Let's get back to the lesson at hand. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to... Where is it? Oh, I lost it. Hold on. Here we go. There we are. I found it. All right, so I'm going to pause the chat, I think. We talked about Martin Luther King, right? And how he's about this minister. This is our Nearpod assignment. We're going to go back to this as we go. And today we are going to start with the great, the amazing Rosa Parks. All right, so let me bring up my chat. Are there any questions? Yeah, I'm just going to, I think I'm not going to shut the chat down. I'm going to throw it into slow mode, and then I'll open it up at the end. What is last? Why are you spamming last, guys? That doesn't make any sense. All right, so here we go. Rosa Parks. You guys know about Rosa Parks. Rosa Parks became famous because of the Montgomery bus boycott. It was not to take anything away from Rosa Parks. It was amazing and so brave for a young 30-year-old woman to voluntarily get arrested. But it was voluntary, meaning that it was not voluntary that she should never gotten arrested, right? Segregation of buses was wrong, but it was staged in the sense that the NAACP and the Christian Leadership Conference and all these different civil rights groups, they got together and they decided to stage a bus boycott, and they did it on the back of Rosa Parks. So they put her on the bus. They told her to refuse to change her seat. They had reporters and cameras ready to go, and when the bus driver used the segregation law and they arrested her, people were there to take pictures. Here's an actual photograph of her getting her fingerprints taken at the police office. A lot of times they would not take a picture of you, but like I said, they had reporters on hand. They had lawyers ready to go, and they knew it was going to be a big deal. And when it happened, they immediately went into a bus boycott in Alabama. So, began Montgomery bus boycott. She is a member of the NAACP, which is a civil rights group. And she's called the First Lady of the Civil Rights Movement. So, yeah, super brave of her. Hold on, did I miss anything? Nope, that's it. All right. So, what makes Rosa Parks so amazing is she's just an innocent girl. Just like the photograph I showed yesterday of the student walking to school getting screamed at by that angry student for no reason, right? I mean, just because she wants to go to school with white kids. Same thing here. Like here, they're treating her like she's a criminal, right? You got a police officer with a gun and they're fingerprinting her, and there's a famous mugshot of Rosa Parks. And she's just an educated young woman that sat on a seat on the bus. Like, the hypocrisy, the ridiculousness of these laws they're shown to be ridiculous just by showing the American people the truth of it. You know, this is one of the reasons why Martin Luther King was always about nonviolence, because he was like, you don't have to be violent to show people how stupid something is. Sometimes you can just point it out to them and they'll realize how dumb it is. Malcolm X is someone who's a little bit different. Malcolm X does not agree. Malcolm, I'll answer that question. James Deedy posted a question about, do I think the Martin Luther King assassination was planned and staged? No, I don't. All right, so Malcolm X is different than Martin Luther King. They're both civil rights leaders. They both want equality for black Americans. But Martin Luther King envisions a world where black and white kids can live together peacefully, and he wants to go about equality non-violently, right? With non-violent protests. It's called civil disobedience. You disobey, but you don't do it. You do it civilly. You don't do it violently. Malcolm X is different. Malcolm X feels like a race war is more realistic, where, you know, black people should fight for their freedom. They have every right to fight for their freedom, just like the Americans fought for their freedom from the British violently. That African Americans, you know, should be allowed to fight for their freedom, and that they should do what they have to do to attain equality. And if that means living in a society where white and black people don't live together, but they live separate but equal, truly equal, you know, Malcolm X is not necessarily opposed to that. He just believes, he's more of a guy who believes that if violence is needed, then violence is needed and should happen. This doesn't mean Malcolm X. I think Malcolm X gets a bum rap a lot of times in history, because people look at it like, oh my God, he's violent, you know, he's a bad guy, and he's not. He's not a bad guy. He's not violent. It's just he thinks the same way George Washington thought, or Thomas Jefferson thought, or Patrick Henry thought, you know, where he just thought that to gain equality it's okay to fight. Where Martin Luther King Jr. realized in our society that fighting was only going to make it worse, and so he believed more in a nonviolent protest. He's a fierce advocate for African Americans. He's a member of Nation of Islam, but later left. So yeah, this is really interesting, because a lot of African Americans in the United States, they fall into Islam, but it's not Middle Eastern Islam in the sense that it's like the Middle East. It's the same religion. It's just that it's a like a black African American version of Islam. So there you go. Disagree with Martin Luther King's nonviolent strategy for equality. He didn't disagree with Martin Luther King wanting equality. He disagreed with the idea that he wasn't willing to fight for it. And he actually got criticized for calling Martin Luther King Jr. an Uncle Tom. And an Uncle Tom is from the famous book that you guys should have learned about in 7th grade called Uncle Tom's Cabin, which was a book written by a white person about the experiences of slavery. And it tried to get people to empathize with slaves, to really help support the abolition of slavery. But it becomes a criticism where if you, in America during the Civil Rights Movement, if you were an African American who wasn't willing to do what was necessary to gain equality, or you were supporting, you know, white rules that hurt African Americans, a lot of times they would call you an Uncle Tom. And it basically meant like you're a teacher's pet and you're not like one of the guys. And so I'm going to show this little video clip. Here we go.
ideological, or is it personality? What else?
Probably personality. It was not the statement that originally was given by the movement when we split. It's more personality than anything else.
You've called people like Martin Luther King, who just got a Nobel Peace Prize, an Uncle Tom. Is this correct, first?
Well, I'd rather say that in the States, there's a law that has recently been passed, or a decision handed down by the court, wherein if you call someone an Uncle Tom, they can sue you for libel.
Well,
so I never refer to them as Uncle Toms. I would say that Uncle Martin is my friend.
Uncle Martin is your friend, yet you would disagree with his approach to what he wants to accomplish.
Definitely. If his approach would bring about what the black man in America needs to completely eliminate the problem that we have, I would say well and good. But I very much doubt that anyone who adopts the approach that Martin Luther King has been teaching to our people in that country can point to any meaningful gains that has actually served to solve the problem.
Black Muslims have sometimes, whether you have or not, and I think probably you have sometimes, it seemed to me, been preaching hate to meet hate.
I don't advocate any kind of hate.
But there's a lot of talk that sounds very much like it.
No, I think that the guilt complex of the American white man is so profound until when you begin to analyze the real condition of the black man in America, instead of the American white man eliminating the causes that create that condition, he tries to cover it up by accusing his accusers of teaching hate. But actually, they're just exposing him for being responsible for what exists.
Well, that's something of an argument, but I've heard speeches made by some of the people of your group. I think I've heard you make speeches. It seemed to me that you were advocating what I would have to describe, I think, as violence to meet the serious injuries that have been done your people, with which I totally agree.
I don't call that violence. I don't in any way encourage black people to go out and initiate acts of aggression indiscriminately against whites. But I do believe that the black man in the United States and any human being, anywhere, is well within his right to do whatever is necessary, by any means necessary, to protect his life and property, especially in a country where the federal government itself has proven that it is either unable or unwilling to protect the lives and property of those human beings.
Just before Pierre takes it, you've got to...
So you could see, I mean, he says it best, honestly. He really does. Like, he says, like, he doesn't support violence towards people, but rather he believes that people have a right to use violence to protect their families and them stuff. This in history, there's always been a duality. There's always been two famous civil rights leaders that have had two different approaches. You know, if you go back to the Civil War era, where you had W.E.B. Du Bois, an educated, free African American who supports, you know, equality, and you had Booker T. Washington, a guy who was born into slavery and then later becomes free. And they had two different viewpoints, you know. And later in the civil rights movement, you had Martin Luther King Jr., who really was nonviolent, and then you have Malcolm X, who really not that Malcolm. There were hundreds of civil rights leaders, but these were the most famous ones that represented the two sides of the argument. You know, you have Rosa Parks, you have Malcolm, Martin Luther King. You have these people that support nonviolent protests, and then you have people like Stokely Carmichael and Malcolm X, who are more willing to do what it has to be done in their eyes to gain equality. And I'm not saying Malcolm X is right, and I'm not saying Martin Luther King Jr. is right. I'm simply saying that you have to be compassionate and say, okay, well, and you know, would I fight for my freedom? And that's a question you have to answer yourself. I can tell you this: we have, as a country, fought a revolution for our freedoms, and so there's that. So that is kind of interesting, and yeah. Let's go back to my thing. Let's get our music back up. What do we got here? What do we got? All right. All right, so there is Malcolm X. All right, so, whoa. Oh, we'll go right into it. All right, so Robert Kennedy, okay? So Robert F. Kennedy, he is obviously related to John F. Kennedy. He is the brother of John F. Kennedy. And he was the Secretary of State under John F. Kennedy. He helped run his campaign with John F. Kennedy, and he is the younger brother. His name is Bobby Kennedy, okay? And Bobby Kennedy, after his brother is assassinated, after John F. Kennedy is assassinated and Lyndon B. Johnson becomes president, Bobby Kennedy is a freedom. He's a freedom fighter. He's a liberal Democrat. He's going to kind of support Martin Luther King Jr. He's going to kind of support rights for poor people. And he is going to run for president. And a lot of people think he would have become president, but unfortunately, he gets assassinated later in his life too. But he says, each time a man stands up for an ideal or acts to improve the lot of others or strikes out against injustice, he sounds out a tiny ripple of hope. All right, so he's a U.S. Attorney General. He helps protect the freedom fighters. He's Attorney General, not Secretary of State. Sorry. He helps protect freedom fighters, freedom riders. Sorry, freedom riders are what happened is on college campuses in the North. College students would get on buses. It wasn't all college students, but that's primarily where it was based. And they would take a freedom ride. And a freedom ride was they would get in the bus and they would drive down south. And then they would protest. They would protest segregation. They would maybe go have a sit-in a restaurant where they refused to get up unless they were fed. And these would be black and white students sitting together, breaking segregation laws. And this is known as freedom riders. He supports desegregation as a New York senator. And like I said, he is assassinated in 1968 as he began to campaign for presidency. So here's that famous photograph I was talking about, where the woman is screaming in the background. That's Elizabeth Eckford attempting to attend Little Rock High School. Elizabeth is the African-American girl in the front. So pretty sad stuff. Some more challenges. This is a sit-in. Sit-ins were very popular where college students, black and white students together. That's why one girl is white in that picture and one girl is black. And they go and they sit at a restaurant and they refuse to get up even though they're sitting in the wrong segregated area. And what would happen a lot of times is people would get angry and they would pour drinks on their head and they would hit them and spit at them and the police would come and they would get guard dogs. And again, this is a Martin Luther King Jr. type of protest because it is civil disobedience. It is a non-violent protest. All they're doing is sitting down. They're not yelling anything. They're not saying anything. And yet they're being physically abused. And here's a photograph of a guy pouring water over a girl's head because of the sit-in. Here's a picture of a freedom ride, right? Freedom ride is they would drive down sometimes through towns and hold signs out the window and yell for freedom. And then on the bottom picture, you have a bus that was firebombed. So you would have like members of the KKK or white supremacists or just people who didn't like freedom riders. And they would throw Molotov cocktails and sometimes students would get hurt and even killed. And it was a pretty violent situation. You know, the South really did not like the idea that Northerners, especially college students, were coming down trying to impose their politics onto them. Here you have a peaceful protest where they're walking through Birmingham, Alabama on foot. It's a simple march. That's all it is. They're not rioting, and yet the police tell them to disperse, and then they eventually open up with fire hoses into the crowd. And those of you who probably don't know this, I mean, why would you know this? I really don't know this, but I've heard that being hit with a fire hose is extremely dangerous and very painful, like to the point that it can rip chunks of skin off, and if it, depending on where it hits you, it can even kill you. So if they open a fire hose within 6 feet and they blast you in the face, it could literally kill you. That's how hard the fire hose hits. And so it tears through people's skin. It's a very violent thing to do to people. Here's another photograph. What they would do is a lot of times they would use dogs, and the dogs would attack people. Now again, this is one of Martin Luther King Jr.'s grand plans, is not to get people attacked by dogs or hit by fire hoses, but he knew that this was going to happen. And if they could film it, if they could take pictures, and around America, people would see African Americans walking peacefully and then being assaulted and being attacked, maybe people around America would realize how wrong it is. And that's almost exactly what happened. It really became such a a stain on the image of America during the 1960s that the federal government eventually had to act and help people. James Deedy says, I've been in the direction of a fire hose once with the fire gear on, and it does not feel very good. I had a couple bruises. Why were you in front of a fire hose, James? That seems dangerous. Don't do that. Here you have civil rights is burning, and they're not putting, they're not helping. Another cartoon, it says all of the cities in America that are having race issues. You have Newark, Detroit, Plainfield, Cincinnati, Boston, Minneapolis, Buffalo, Nashville, and then you have Congress, and Congress is not really they're not putting a fire out, they're not helping, meaning that the fire of civil rights is racism, and the government up to this point is not doing what it needs to do to really help. This is another very famous photograph. I believe this photograph won a Pulitzer Prize for photography. It's a gentleman using a American flag to spear a protester. And one of the reasons why this is in 1976, so it's a little bit later, but one of the reasons why this photograph is won so many awards is because of the irony behind it, right? The American flag represents freedom for people and equality. And yet this person who's racist and full of hatred is using it in the exact opposite way. He's using it to take someone's freedom away. And so it really shows the irony and the hypocrisy of the people and treating African Americans and taking their rights away when America was founded on equal rights. Alright, so we're not going to get into events. What I want us to do now, since we're talking about protests, I want you guys to head on over to the, has anyone done, head on over to Nearpod, and I want you guys to take a look at the Nearpod stuff, right? And take a look. So what you're going to do on Nearpod, if you're a little confused, basically I took this handout that I would have given to you if we were in class together. Okay, I'm gonna open the chat up. Take slow mode off. Slow mode is off. All right, it is terrible, Vicky. It's awful. Civil rights is not a funny issue, especially considering it's still happening today. There's still people being oppressed and killed, and it's not good. So here, basically, I would have given this to you in class, and I think I messed up on one of the pictures. I put the wrong picture in, but not the point. The point is, I would have given you this graphic organizer, and it would have had the sign protest, and then I would have wanted you to write the problem and then write like a solution. And I was like, how can I get the kids to do this? And so the way I did that is I translate it into Nearpod. I put the photograph in Nearpod, and then I would write decent housing protest sign. At almost every civil rights protest, there would be signs held up with slogans and demands for what the protesters sought. So I want you to tell me, what's the problem? So decent housing. So let's take a look. I'm going to take a look right now. There's 3 of them, if you didn't know. La da da. All right, here we go. All right, you ready? Here we go. So, would you like to approve? Nah, they can just. All right, so here it says. So Dante, he writes, the problem: they demanded better housing and more equal jobs. Okay, but think about it. It's not. I want specifics, right? They wanted equal right. It's more than equal rights. This sign specifically is talking about housing. What is the problem with housing? So Tori writes, minorities weren't given the same job opportunities and proper housing as everyone else. If you're not given the proper job opportunities, you're not making the money that other people are making, and then that means that they're limited to living in areas that they can afford. And since they're not making good money, they can't afford a lot of areas, which means they're living in the projects in the inner cities. They're living, which projects refer to government housing. They're living in small, tiny houses in close proximity. And they can't afford their rent, and so these people are saying, kind of what Tori wrote, right, that they're because of their lack of job opportunities, they do not have adequate housing. You know, too many people are in one house, or the quality of the house is not good. They don't have running water. They don't have heat. Maddie wrote, the jobs in housing were not as good as others. They demand to have, better housing and jobs. Ryan writes, people wanted to have equal rights. It's more than equal rights, guys. That's too vague. Specifically housing. Equal rights is a large term, right? Olivia writes, African Americans weren't being granted decent housing because they weren't accepted in nicer neighborhoods. That is true. Back in the 1950s and 60s, you couldn't, even if you had money, you couldn't go buy a house as an African American, especially down south in certain areas. I mean, they're segregating schools and restaurants and bathrooms. You don't think they're segregating communities? And so you're forced to live in these certain areas, and it's not freedom. And America is built on freedom. So the solution to this problem, Dante wrote, they got what they wanted. Well, that's vague. Derek writes, they protest until people see their cause. That is true. They did protest, but as you guys know, protesting doesn't always work, right? One of the buffs wrote, protest until they got what they wanted. Maddie writes, they protested. They would do whatever protests they had to get people to see. So you're right. A lot of times they would just protest, meaning they would get people to see what they're doing. But they did other things too. They rioted, right? They would go through their neighborhoods and light fires and break things to show America how angry they were that they're being trapped in these areas. They would try to run for government and get law and legislation passed. A lot of times they would move up into northern states where maybe they had better opportunities to get better housing. A lot of government programs were passed to help financially support and help them to get better housing. A lot of regulation in the housing market was created, basically where laws were created to make sure that, building codes to make sure the houses were built a certain adequate level. Ali wrote, solution, continue to protest. Again, this has to do a lot. I would say the decent housing also has to do with voting. Because if you can vote for politicians who understand this problem and can make laws to change it and make life better. But if you're not voting, then no politician is going to listen to you, and therefore you lose your voice. All right, here we go. We have voting rights sign. So the voting rights sign, here's the picture. There it is. We demand voting rights now. I love it. And then we have the problem. The problem was people wanted voting rights. Just so you guys are aware, they could vote. The 13th Amendment, right, outlaws slavery. The 14th Amendment grants people citizenship, and the 15th Amendment gives them the right to vote. And so they have the right to vote. The problem is they can't vote because of fear, right? They're going to be attacked by Ku Klux Klan members. They can't vote because of poll taxes and literacy tests and the grandfather clause and different Jim Crow era laws that are preventing them. So they on paper they have the right to vote, but they really don't have the freedom to vote like a regular person does. Problem, people wanted proper voting rights, and that's good, Buff. It's proper voting rights, right? Because they had voting rights, but it wasn't proper. Derek writes, again, people wanted equal rights in this picture. They wanted equal voting rights. Solution, they protest again, and eventually it saw people. Again, it has to do with, this is a lot of the big marches that Martin Luther King Jr. led were voting marches, to show people that they were allowed to go and vote and not fear that their family was going to be attacked. Maddie wrote, they had unfair voting rights, and when they tried to do something, the police were very rough. Solution, they protest till they were heard. Maddie, one of the ways they were heard is that those photographs of them shooting the fire hose. So you peacefully protest. You peacefully protest, and then you film it. And so you're walking down the street, and all of a sudden police show up, and the police are like, disperse, and you're just walking, you're not bothering anyone. And then they attack guard dogs on you, they shoot you with fire hoses, they capture it on video, and then they play this video for the whole world, not just the North, not just the South, but I mean, people in Russia are watching these videos, and they're laughing, and they're saying to themselves, I thought America was better than communism because they had freedom, but look what they're doing to their own people. And it forces the U.S. government to have to fix the problem because that's truly what they care about, right? And they care about their image, and it's damaging their image. It's not that they're not really caring about the minorities. If they cared about the minorities at that point, it wouldn't be in that position already, you know? Minorities had a lack of freedoms. In this photo, this is Ali. In this photo is dealing with voting. Voting was one of the biggest issues with equality and justice. People weren't allowed to freedom to vote just because of the color of skin. They were allowed to vote again. It was that they were being punished through Jim Crow laws, grandfather clause, poll taxes, and literacy tests. And Ali, you're right. Think about it. Voting is the foundation. If you can't vote, every problem you have, you can't change. Think about that, guys. I don't care what your problem is. If you disagree with something, you could always vote for someone to make a law that's going to change it. But if you can't vote, then you can't change anything. And that's where it kind of falls in, right? Think about it. Let's say you love Donald Trump. Let's say you dislike Donald Trump, right? Doesn't matter. You could think the president is a great president. You could think the president is not a great president. But if you can't vote, you can't. If you like him, you can't support him. If you don't like him, you can't vote for someone else. You're almost not. You don't have a say in it, and that's not good. Kaylee writes, the voting laws were thought to be unfair. They favored certain groups over others, and people were angry. They began to protest to make their voice heard. And you guys know that, right? No one likes to be treated unfairly. Think a coach that does it, or a teacher that treats a kid. They like a kid over another kid. You guys hate that stuff, right? It makes your blood boil, right? All right, and then the last one we're going to kind of go over. Hello. Oh, wait, there it is. It just took a second to load. Load, Nearpod. Load. Oh, there we go. All right. So, Emma Powell. Hi, Emma. She writes, the problem was... Oh, this is the picture. Before we listen to Emma Powell. This picture is segregation is morally wrong. That's what the picture says. A little blurry. And Emma Powell writes, the problem was some people wanted one thing and some wanted another. For example, some people supported sit-ins. That's true. And some people did support, a lot of people supported segregation, right? A lot of white Americans supported segregation. And they are the ones in government. They're the ones making the laws down south. They're the ones in the police department. They're the ones in the fire department. They're the ones teaching in the schools. And it just makes it tough because the people in power are the people that support segregation. Mr. Buff writes, problem, students and teachers and parents of the students weren't treated fairly at all. As a result, the citizens protested. True. But remember, the solution on this one, you could even write about how the president had to call in the military, right, to actually escort these students into school. Alex wrote, white people got to go to great schools and African Americans went to terrible schools, which was bad. The solution was that small groups of African Americans were integrated into white schools. Ali D writes, segregation in schools would put African Americans into a terrible box. But when people of color were allowed in certain schools, people would terrorize them. There was no way to get out of the hatred. This was shown in the situation at Little Rock. Ali, that was beautifully said. And if you watch Remember the Titans, it continues, Ali. It continues throughout the 1960s, right? 1960. Little Rock was in the 50s, right? So it continues throughout the 1960s, the 1970s, the 1980s. Even today, there are certain areas in this country that do not treat kids fairly, right? Tori, innocent students and kids were separated and treated differently based on the color of their skin. It was a clear sign of racial discrimination and lack of freedom. African Americans wanted a fair chance at a good education. And I'm going to just pause there. That is Tori. If you really can listen to what Tori wrote, because again, to truly understand the civil rights movement and why the 1964, we're going to talk about this tomorrow, but the 1964 voter and 65 Voting Rights Act and why laws were eventually passed giving African Americans more freedoms. A lot of that has to do with the Cold War. It's this embarrassment that this civil rights movement is causing worldwide to the United States image in the Cold War, right? We talk on one hand to the Russians like, oh, it's so great to be an American because we have freedom, and communism, they take your freedom away. And then the other hand, we're shooting people with fire hoses because they want freedom, who are American. And it's a hypocrisy of it. James writes in chat, just think about this. Even though African Americans were hated, they still managed to get by. And by my logic, they created most music and coped with that, and music helped build more respect for them. Absolutely. Well, it's not music, James. It's pop culture. As African Americans gained equality, they had a foothold on our music and Hollywood and writings and poetry and pop culture. And I agree with you. They totally have managed to really have a massive impact on the what it means to be an American today for all Americans, and it's really a beautiful thing. I do think when you're talking about poetry and writing and music, you have to understand that usually people who've been through tough times write the best music because they have a lot of passion, right? And they really have been through really tough times, so it's important for that. Tyler writes, the problem was that segregation was already so largely accepted that it was very difficult to change this, no matter how wrong it was. However, once African Americans in small groups were allowed to attend white schools, they were still treated poorly. Tyler, you couldn't have said it better, honestly. Totally agree. Everyone supported it. And that's why World War II was such a big deal, because finally, for the first time, African Americans got to leave the South and go to war, and then they got to see a glimpse of what it could be like, so that when they came home, even though the whole world was against them in their local neighborhoods, they started to really rise up and protest. Tyler also writes the Tuskegee Airmen. That's true. Those were the first African American Navy pilots. Were they Navy or Air Force? I think they were Navy. Problem, when different races protested, they were attacked by the fire department and the police department, and they were all hurt terribly. Solution, abolish segregation and treat everyone as equal. Again, though, that's a tough solution, right? Because you got to change the way people think. You can't just tell a racist person who's violent towards African Americans to stop being violent and to accept them. You have to literally change the way they think and and make them see the truth of equality in order to get them to treat someone better. I mean, think of bullying in school. And you guys all know this, right? We've all been bullied in school, even when I was a kid. When a teacher can only do so much, like if a kid is being mean, a teacher could watch that student and say, hey, be respectful, all this stuff. But you know, when someone wants to be mean to you, they can give you a look. They don't even have to say or do anything. A look can make you feel uncomfortable. And so it's very difficult to enforce hatred, like to stop people from being hateful of hatred without changing the way they think, right? James Deede's right? It's also Beatles. The Beatles did it too, James. It wasn't just Elvis, right? He's talking about the Beatles actually bought music, I believe, off Abbey Road from African Americans in the South, and they like adjusted it. They didn't steal it wholesale, but they definitely got a lot of their style from Abbey Road, which is one of their most famous records from African Americans and things like that. Which, you know, artists are always stealing ideas from each other. It's a normal thing. Add this, it will take a while for everyone to treat each other as equals. Well, I think on Long Island we do a decent job at it. We're not perfect here, but we're definitely much more equal than most places in the country. Victoria Penzick, segregation was wrong and it was a clear sign of racial discrimination. Americans don't deserve to be separated based on the color of their skin or on their culture. People just accepted segregation, which was so wrong. Well, people down south accepted it, Vicky, right? Not everywhere, right? North never had it. And you have to understand that the South came from a slavery society, and then after the Civil War, they went right into segregation. So, really, they went from slavery to segregation. So we're talking hundreds of years of this type of culture that became normal in the South. All right, good job, everyone. I felt good. Did you feel good about that? I kind of felt really good about that. Like, really good. Do you know who I'm missing today? Where's Delaney at? Delaney, you in the chat? Where you at, Delaney? Let's go. Where's Angelina Buttigieg? I'm gonna see some students. Where you guys at? Is Patrick here today? Like, where is everyone? Huh? Oh, Patrick's here. Way to go. Barry's here. There's Delaney. I know Olivia's here. Maddie's here. How about Amelia? Where's Amelia been? Or Emmeline Cressy? Where's that girl been at? I want to. Where are these people? You know what I mean? Like, come on now. Where's Kai? Where's not Kai? Kira. Kai's sister. Where's Kira? Is Kira here? Like, I want to. Where are you people? Let's go. No, don't cancel Jimmy. I don't know what that means. Oh, the Nightbot attacked Jimmy? What's going on over here? What's going on with this Nightbot? What did Nightbot do? Let's see. Hold on. Dee, I'm taking a look. Alright, he wrote, oh, you just spam something? Yeah. Nightbot can be dumb. Just be patient. Yeah, it's just question of the day, basically. So, question of the day. Do we have a song, Jimmy? Did you make the song yet? No? That's alright. Alright, so the question of the day, this one's going to be a good one. Here we go. Oh, I got some Doom. I'm dizzy. Whoa. Okay. You should make a metal one. It'd be amazing. All right. So question of the day. Let's. Well, I'm really dizzy now. Never good head banger. Head banger. Are you ready? Ah, what do you mean answer questions, Mr. Vulture? I don't understand. Well, let me show you. I believe it's this one. I gotta see if I got the right one. No, this is the wrong one. That's not it. That's not it. This is great. I'll give you this one. Hold on. Let me find. I got a better one. I got a better one. Hold your horses, everyone. Let's listen to some Doom. I'm just finding my worksheet. Hold on. Give me a sec. It's getting funky. A little funk. Do we want... I don't think I want this one. Nope. Nah, I don't want that one either. I'll give you guys a fun one, right? Birmingham Ballad worksheet. What's this? Oh, I like this one. That's good. That's what I'll give you. Here we go. Alright, so the way it's gonna work, guys, is you're gonna have to answer the questions. So what you do is it says answer the questions. I have attached the PDF. Please answer questions in your queue of the Google Doc, right? And please answer questions and rewrite the questions in your Google Doc. So basically what's going to happen is you're going to click on it. All right, guys, can you see me? Is everything good? You're going to click on it. What is going on here? There you go. Hold on. Hold your horses, everyone. Everyone slow. There we go. Click on it, and then it's going to take you here. You're basically going to read about this, and then here are the 6 questions, and you're just going to kind of copy. You don't have to, you could echo, right? But you're going to put those questions in your question of the day sheet, and that's how we're going to do it, right? Because I can't, that's just what we're going to do. So, there. There's your question of the day for Tuesday. By the way, I don't know if you guys have noticed this, but I have kind of caught up on all my grading. Have you guys noticed that at all? Anyone notice that? And I've noticed that for the most part, you guys are doing a really good job, and I'm totally proud of you. It's like a jam going on. But there are some of you who are really not working, and that's fine, but eventually it's going to catch up to you. And we've been notified by the principal in the school, right, that to identify students who are falling behind so that we can make sure that it's not too much of a problem. So, if, I don't want to have to do that. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to email you. If you're one of those kids that's like struggling, I'm going to send that email out, and you can kind of keep up. You can always make up work. This learning from home thing has made us be all very lenient. So that's a good thing if you're falling behind. But you got to take advantage. If you don't do your work, you're still going to fail, and that would be not... That's not no one wants to go down that path, especially with homeschooling. That's not fun. So don't do that. So check your Google Classroom. I haven't put all the grades into eSchool yet. I'm still figuring out like how to switch Google Classroom and eSchool. You know what I mean? Like link them up. But they're all on your Google Classroom. They're all there. So check them out, please, if you're curious. If not, then don't worry about it. Right? Guys, all right, so here we got, I also noticed, like, we used to have, should we listen to Shrexophone? Yeah, I'm going to vote yes, absolutely. I've also noticed that we used to have, like, 60 kids every day when I first started doing this, and now we don't. Now we're down to, like, maybe 30 a class, which is fine, because I know a lot of kids watch after the fact, but you just got to make sure that you're keeping up with the work. I know it's annoying. I know even me, like, every day doing it, it's like, it feels like I'm doing the same thing every day. I get it. But we have about a month and a half left of this, and we just got to kind of tough it out and do the best we can. And then we get summer vacay, and everyone loves summer vacay. Yes, we do. Is today chilly? I hope it's a nice day out today. It looks nice. I think I'm gonna go for a walk in the park. I need to get out of the house. I'm dying. Not good. I got neighbors who are all sick with COVID. Poor people. So it's definitely still out there. Definitely no joke. But I think they're gonna be all right. Thank God. Copy and paste the link. What are you talking about, Patrick? What link? This has got to be the weirdest thing that you guys do. I don't understand it. I'm a little weirded out by it, and it freaks me out. And I think you guys are a little scary because of it. So with that though, I am going to show you guys my. You know what? I can do that right now. Hold on. Hold on. Just give me a sec. Oh, we got that. Good. Good. We lost the library though, so let's go here. Let's go here. Let's go here. Let's go here. Let's go. So question of the day tomorrow is, why do you guys like Shrexophone? It's embarrassing. I feel embarrassed for you, and I'm a little frankly worried. So there you go. And how do you like my Pixar thing? I'm going to try to see. Let's see if it works now. Hold on. I got to rename the thing. Hold on. Here we go. Like, it could have been better, but I like it. It was pretty good. You know, I kind of rushed that one. Anyway, so that's it for today. We're done, if you guys haven't realized it already. And, yeah, Derek, you get a head start on tomorrow's question of the day. Why is Shrexophone a thing? That's kind of weird. It's cool. No, Vicky. Bad, Vicky. Bad. No. All right, guys, I'm leaving. I'm going upstairs. It's 11:11, huh? So make a wish, and see you guys later. Bye.